You've mentioned publicly a few times about how you want to leave a legacy of PMI's unsmoking. Talk about that. Going smoke-free.
The question is how we can use the science and the technology today to address it, to have a product for the people who otherwise, in our case, would continue smoking.
Inilah Endgame. Hai teman-teman, hari ini kita kedatangan Jacek Olczak, pimpinan dari Philip Morris International. Hi Jacek, thank you so much for coming on to our show.
Hi Gita, thank you very much for having me.
As usual, I usually start off with simple questions about how you grew up and what got you interested or what sort of subjects interested you in early days all the way to your university days and how you basically became what you are today as a captain of industry.
So I was born in Poland, last century obviously. It was 1965. I was educated almost for the whole educations when Poland was still the communist regime.
Right.
And just about the last year of my university, you had, Solidarity, Berlin Wall, first free elections, and, Poland moved to the democratic system, essentially liberalizing economy. And I was lucky to be born or finish university at the right time. So, you have to imagine when I entered university in Poland, we didn't have passports, right? So we're not free to travel. My parents were investing in the after-school activities, which was essentially English classes. But at that time, you didn't have really access to any English news media and, actually even not too much of a literature or, any science books, etc. So it was a little bit a pretty, one could say useless investment because you can learn in English, you will never have a chance to practice. And then boom, comes the miracle, the system collapses and, they gave me a passport so I could travel. So I finished economy, I studied economy and, you might be laughing, but I watched that movie, The First Wall Street, right?
With Michael Douglas?
Yeah, Michael Douglas, the Sheens, etc.
Yeah, and Gordon Gekko.
Yeah, absolutely. And
how could anybody forget that movie?
So, I was that, still a young, person, young student, and I watched this movie and I start liking this world of finance. And I also like the way they were dressed. I don't know if you remember, there was this double button suits, etc.
Sure.
So I thought, I watched this movie in a cinema in my hometown, and I said, what, I want to be a person like that. So, this is why I studied economy, I learned accounting, and actually my first job was in accounting. And this was just after opening of the system of the border. So I was lucky. I found a company in London, accounting firm, moved there, then with that firm get back to Poland. And I was all the time in finance. So it was, auditing firm, consulting firm. So it was all great. I started realizing a first step to achieve my dream, to be in the world of finance. But it was consulting, right? So you're not really making a decisions, you're advising others.
Right.
And how consultant works. They give you an advice and then in a footprint, they make all the disclaimers that the risk is on you. And Philip Morris at that time was looking for the head of the finance department in the very small office in Poland. It was less than 100 people. So I thought, why don't I try myself to be a head of the finance of the small office? So I started, and I actually thought I come to Philip Morris for like a couple of years. I learned something, and then I hopped to another company.
This was in 1993, right? When you joined?
Yeah, that was 1993.
Okay.
So essentially by 1996, 1997, I should be changing jobs and going to another company. And I have to say say that I failed with this objective because I stayed here for 30 years. And, the long story short, from finance, I moved to operations, to the manufacturing.
Right.
And I was working there for a good few years. I fell in love with manufacturing more than accounting. I actually thought at that time that the life of an accountant was pretty boring. The engineering life is much more exciting. You're solving real problems. It's a lot of group work and so on. From a manufacturing, Philip Morris offered me a job of a sales director in Poland. At that time, we've been already running, almost 40% market share. We had thousands of employees after privatizations when we bought the one of the major manufacturers in Poland. So it was really, very sizable, very big business and important to Philip Morris. And then from a sales department, then I assumed my first role as a general manager. So they sent me to Romania, from Romania back to Poland. Then Poland became the center for the area, so the Central Europe, etc. And then I moved to Germany, was running Germany, Austria. Then I became the regional president for the European Union. And this was about the time that I completely forgot that I started about finance, and my dream was, to play high in the finance world. I was promoted to the chief financial officer. I have to say that, becoming a chief financial officer, I actually realized my dream, which, was born during this, about the 2-hour cinema movie some years ago, right? And I went, so, it's nice reflection, right? You finally got it, you get there through the different path that you had initially in your head, but actually you don't complain that you conquered the mountain through the different path, which you draw yourself on the map. And then after CFO, when I thought it's about the culmination of my career, then I got all operations, which is nothing else than all the 100+ markets in which we operate and all factories and you name it. It's essentially all P&L was under my supervision as a chief operating officer. When I thought at that time, well, this is a mountain even higher than I dreamt that I was dreaming before, and that's essentially fulfills all of my expectation. Then as of last month, I am a chief executive officer. So, I don't know what's the
Congratulations.
I don't think what's the learning from that thing, that maybe when you are young, it's worth going to cinemas and, watch the good movie and try to try to have dreams. I think it's all about the dreams and what you want to achieve.
When they asked you to switch over from finance to other divisions, did you have an option to say no, or was it pretty much like
yes,
you have to?
No, well, no. Look, it is normally in a humanly run organizations, you always have the option to say no. But it's more about trace that the company is putting a time pressure, right? Because the more time you get to think it through, and presumably you will never be conclusive, right? Because your brain will start analyzing all the pros and cons, and that's the perfect situations that you will not make any decision. If you'll ask your kid to first time to go to the swimming pool, you need a little bit of push, right? I mean, I haven't seen the kid who, jump into the water without some sort of encouragement from a parents, to put it like that. So it's a little bit like this. The company gives it an options, but again, I think it's much easier with employees if they know where they want. Look, in every job you have a learning curve, right? So you're in your comfort zone, right? Because you know a lot of things, you know the people around, you know whom you are dependent on, you know who are your internal customers. So, after 6 months in a job, you start really, be very comfortable, right? What's the job about?
Right.
And every time you change the job, you start from scratch. So, beginning of the learning, whatever that new thing is, are not very, pleasant moment.
Right. I want to pick up on this. It sounds like a typical story of how anybody makes it to the top at a multinational company. You got to be broad-based, right? You got to be exposed to different areas of the organization, right? How would you compare this ladder climbing to the startups that we're seeing nowadays, right? These startups that have just started some years ago, they've grown to be, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? In no time, as compared to the amount of time that it took you, 30 years, right? What advice do you have for some of these young techpreneurs who probably are going through a completely different universe? Or is there a similarity or...
Well, I think it is more of an opportunity which, young people have today, which was not, that much laid down in front of me, 30 years ago. I mean, I don't know how I would act if, 30 years ago, there was this alternative path well established to go and start your own business and, start being an entrepreneur. But I also learned one thing that, in a corporation, even of the size like Philip Morris, the entrepreneurial skills, the entrepreneurship is something which is a very good competency or very good value which you're bringing to the company. I've seen a lot of people, I've seen some people who are unsuccessful in a company like ours, not because they made the bad decision. I mean, they were unsuccessful because they couldn't make decision, right? So that's a completely different thing. I mean, actually, look, I've made the mistakes in my life. The question is not that in a companies like here, you cannot experiment, you cannot take the risk. It's more, how quickly you learn from your mistakes and move forward.
But I want to pick up on you've mentioned publicly a few times about how you want to leave a legacy of PMI's unsmoking. Talk about that, going smoke-free. And you've been pretty bold about this.
Yeah, we are very bold because we know what the science is about as a product. But just to start, that everyone will understand what we're talking about. The prime cause of a harm caused by smoking is the fact that you inhale the smoke. The smoke is an outcome of a combustion. So you burn the tobacco, you burn the cigarette, okay? You burn any organic matter, you inhale the smoke, it's bad for your health. If you like a grill party, the person who is, supervising the grill and, turning the beef on, both sides, etc., presumably inhale such amount of toxins that it's really bad. Okay, so this is how the nature works. You burn something, you inhale the smoke, bad for your health. But there is another aspect of the thing, right? I mean, people use cigarettes because they like them. Okay, it's difficult to understand for the non-smoker, and the non-smoker shouldn't start smoking because, of the health, etc. We all know this whole thing. But for the smoker, they like smoking. Okay, despite the fact that that smokers are aware of the risk associated with smoking. So, many years ago, when we said, okay, cigarette is causing the harm and these are these diseases, whether it's respiratory or cardiovascular or cancer, etc., as an outcome of smoking, is there a way to design that product or come up with the product which is as much as possible reducing the negative consequences, but somehow retains the pleasurable component of that thing, okay? And that component, frankly speaking, is very much coming from a nicotine, but is also the ritual, the hand-to-mouth movement, all of these things. So nicotine is not really an issue with a cigarette. It's not the prime cause of harm. It's all what we call the tar. I add all the other components which you have in a smoke. When we change the process and we don't allow the tobacco to be burned, but we heat it to the very precise level of temperature so as not to trigger combustion, but enough to release some flavors and a nicotine which naturally occurs in a tobacco, you're coming with the product like, our IQOS, the heat not burn product, that you have an aerosol which has some similarity in terms of a taste to the burned cigarette, but you reduce the exposure of the human body to the toxicants by 90 to 95%. So you have a significant reductions in exposure. I think there is enough of the science, and this is not only our science, but scientists from governmental agencies like Food and Drug Administrations in the US, in many other places, which will tell you it's absolutely fair to assume that if you have such a drastic reductions in exposure to toxicants, you also should change over a period of time. Essentially, you have a less risky product, right? I mean, it's not a risk-free, it has a nicotine. Nicotine is addictive, but nicotine as such doesn't create the problem. It's the other substances which creates the problem. You significantly reduce the other substances, you have a much better product. Obviously, always the best decision for a smoker is to quit smoking altogether. However, we know that the consumers are not doing this whole thing for the variety of reasons. But to be very frank, we all know that, we should sleep longer, we should have a more physical exercises, we should eat better, we should drink less, etc. We should have less stress. And, if you fulfill all of these conditions, you will improve your quality of life. The reality is people don't do it. So now the question is how we can use the science and the technology today to address it, to have a product for the people who otherwise, in our case, would continue smoking. Because even WHO in their own estimates, they will tell you that, 5-10 years from now, you will have the same, if not more, smokers than exist today, because you have a growth of the population. And even if some people decide to quit smoking, still majority they don't quit smoking, and therefore you need a product for them. So legacy, when you asked about the legacy, we start with the product 6 or so years ago. We had science, we had the technology, but we're missing a last component. Will consumer accept the product? And this is like a little bit like in a pharma industry. You might have a great pill, great medicine, which addresses the problem, but if you don't want to take it, if you don't want to swallow it, you're still at the square one, right? I mean, so, the question is, will smokers adopt the product? So 6 years ago, we had absolute zero, no sales of this product. Last year, 25% of our total global revenues were already coming from this new product. So we know that there is an acceptance. Okay, many people still have a confusion. The product contains tobacco. It has some generates aerosol. That aerosol look like a smoke, so it must be a smoke. It's all of these things needs to be explained. But as I said, 25% coming of our total global revenue coming from this product. So my legacy, and this word can be used in this context. 5 years from now, I think Philip Morris has a really very high chances of having more than 50% of the revenues coming from this product. Okay, if I achieve this, then essentially that you're so much into this game, into this transformation, then you can start, extrapolating whatever way, and that Philip Morris will become fully smoke-free company. There is another aspect of that thing which we also have, shared with the public. I think in the next 5 years we can generate the first $1 billion coming from the products which have nothing to do with the nicotine or tobacco. Because once we've been developing a product like IQOS, really develop a lot of expertise about inhalation, right? So how the inhalations, how the respiratory system works in a human body. When it comes to the tox assessments, depends which substance you inhale, what impact does it create for your lung in terms of the efficacy. If you inhale a substance, how quickly that substance is becoming biologically available in your bloodstream, right? So our idea here is that we can take some well-known substances in the world of pharma, and by changing the way of administering these substances to the human body, we actually can have a positive impact on the quality of life, maybe morbidity, maybe mortality. They are conditions where the time from the moment when you take the medicine to the moment when that medicine is active in your body, is doing a job in your body, is of a critical essence. Take, for example, the situations when you have heart attack, right, or any cardiac arrest.
Right.
There are some medicines which are giving you the moment when the ambulance arrives to help you. But the way they are being administering to your body is usually through the digestive system. In the digestive system, you work through the digestive system, you wait for the bioavailability of a given substance for 20, 40 minutes or longer. The same substance delivered through your respiratory system, i.e. through your lungs, have a bioavailability in 120 seconds, so 2 minutes. So this definitely has a income on the outcome, but it drives the positive outcomes. So you say there's a company which started as the cigarette, and we definitely the global leader here, and we have a great brands and a lot of local brands like in Indonesia, etc. We know how to make the top quality cigarettes. We know that we need to address the problem of a cigarette, of a smoking. So we're going to the heat-not-burn and other alternatives, but all with the objective of significantly reduce the exposure and help consumers if they don't quit to definitely go to this better alternative. But then you develop capability in the company which you realize you can use for many other purposes. So I just give a couple of examples, but it's really very exciting that your opportunities, we didn't have that opportunities, in front of us 5 years ago because we didn't have a capability. Now we have a capability. All of a sudden, the world is gives us this this new opportunity.
When you launched this new product about 6 years ago, you decided to launch it in Japan, right?
Yeah, you need. And
why was it Japan? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, because you need to start somewhere. Okay, this is the proper answer to these questions. Look, we operate in so many markets, so ultimately you know that, and then the product is designed. This and other versions of the product are designed for the purpose to make them available, affordable, understandable to essentially 1 billion smokers, all smokers, which are there. In the world.
Right.
So, then you need to start somewhere. So you go into the market where first it's easier for us. We have an infrastructure, we have a sizable combustible business. From a trade channel perspective, you have convenience stores, you have a digital, you have a vending machine. So it's a complexity in which you also want to test it. And, it has to be sizable. So, you really try to run the experiment at scale. So we did it. We started actually in one city in Japan, and about a year later we expanded nationally. At the same time, we opened one country in Europe. It was Italy, in the city of Milan. And we also ran the same test. When we were going to the market, the marketing researchers, which we had available at the time, were giving us a conversion rate, if I remember, somewhere in the 30+%, which means from 100 people who will buy the product, 30+% will fully use this product, which means they will stop smoking cigarettes at all. Now, when we went with and this was enough for us to press the button and said, okay, we start, and on the go we will start improving the product. Actually, when we launched the product, the conversion rate shot up to 60+, 70%. Now in many markets, we had the 80+%, which is unheard of rate of conversion with any alternative products. So if you take a smoker, you give him or her one of the alternative products, how many of the smokers will fully stop smoking cigarettes and will just go to this product? And so IQOS is really spectacular on this one. So, we've been encouraged by the research, right? But this is, always sort of artificial setting, and absolutely overwhelmed by the, in a positive sense, by the success in the marketplace. Obviously, if you go to to the markets like, I don't know, take Indonesia, right? When you have such a
which is the largest in the world, right?
It's the largest in the world, but you have. The taste of the product is different, the Kretek, but we're also working on addressing, the Kretek taste directions in our product. So you will hear more from us. Nothing is easy, as always. And everything takes time. but another learning from organizations like this is that there's always almost the same amount of time which you need to devote to solve the problem. So the question is how quickly you will activate the clock, okay? Because the sooner you admit that you have a challenge of the problem, the time starts running. And if something, to be solved takes the 2 years, it's always 2 years. So, the whole art is how quickly you put you leave the stage of denial or avoidance, and you talk openly that this is a challenge, this is the problem, and I need to have a solution. You put the resources, and sooner or later you will have the solution. So it's very critical, to admit where is the, very often companies will try to defend their business model or the trends, etc., and they completely miss the boat. I mean, we all have heard about the Xerox, right, in the past. Which missed the big thing. It's not that they didn't know, that they just didn't want to accept the fact that there was something else which may completely ruin that business. I mean, it happened to Nokia, right? I mean, there are many other companies.
They used to make tires, right? And they made handphones.
Yeah, so it's not that, exactly. So it's not the situations when you are taken by surprise, with the phenomena which was not known to other people. Everyone knew about this whole thing, but only a few people were acting, and the other people didn't want to accept that, the world is changing, the technology is changing, gives you the opportunity, and you really go and adopt it. I mean, look how much time we have lost on the climate conversation, right? I mean, the first 5-10 years was the classical stage of denial. Science is not conclusive, and everyone.
Well, there's still quite a lot denying.
Yeah. But look, but that's the worst, right? Which always happens to us as humanity. That we look, change is not, is not a fun. Change is not, never comes with the pleasure from a day one. But denying a change actually comes with a lot of pain. I mean, we have today even, there are markets where people don't want to recognize that, other smoke-free alternatives, non-combustible alternatives are better products than a cigarette. And, okay, we have to keep on having a dialogue, have a conversations, talk about this whole thing. But, telling me today that IQOS is the same as the cigarette is like telling me that the earth is flat. And, this is not the, it's not the fun in a sense that they are smokers who, if they would have an access to information, if they would have an access to the product, can make their decisions. I mean, humans at the end of the day are making a lot of a lot of smart decisions, providing they have all access to the information, they are getting educated, they are being explained, etc. Okay, so this is where we are. So the stage of denial, I mean, we always waste the time, okay? And this is the only thing which, frankly speaking, you never can get back, because, we are living longer, but, each of us have its own life expectancy, whatever it is, 80, 90, 100, 70 years. But this is there is the definite amount of time which you have in front of you, right, for your life. And you can waste the other resources. You can, lost money. You have to go and I don't know, the companies may go bankrupt. You can resurrect as the company, from the bankruptcy. You can get another financing from external parties and so on. So money you can recover. There is a path to recovering the financial resources, but there is no path to recover the time. So lost time is a lost time.
Sure. Now, if I take a look at the global figure, right, there's about 2.5 trillion cigarettes that are being consumed on a yearly basis, right? Indonesia makes up about 10% of that, give and take.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite encouraging in the sense that you've boldly made this effort to repurpose, right? I just want to inquire a bit more here. If you were to reach that target by 2025 of attaining 50% of your numbers related to smoke-free alternatives, right? When do you think you'd be able to reach 100% smoke-free alternatives? Because that would dovetail in a good way, in a more healthy manner to the globe, right?
Yeah.
particularly to Indonesia?
Well, first, if my dream is to come true, that in 2025 I'll have 50% of my global revenue coming from
Right.
products like IQOS, then definitely Indonesia has to play the role there. But we knew it, and there was no point that, despite the fact that I have a very successful cigarette business in Indonesia, and I think we are not only the key player in our industry, but frankly speaking, the footprint of the tobacco industry in Indonesia is so enormous that there is a significant contribution of tobacco industry to the Indonesian economy. That the fact that we know that we can do today the better cigarette, and on the other hand, having this, a successful business in Indonesia, that we should deny Indonesia access to this product. Actually, quite opposite. I think it's, our job to bring
Right.
that product to Indonesia, end up with the right, surround ourselves with the right support groups. And I think there is a lot of people in Indonesia today that they do realize that, the faster this product get into the hands of the smokers there, the better it is for all of us. And, we need to, on the way, take care of the tobacco growers, make sure that, the machine will have a positive future, and, equally rewarding future as it had the rewarding past with us. I think, obviously, there are things which Philip Morris or Sampoerna have to do. There are things when Sampoerna or Philip Morris will need the supporters, will need the help with others. But I think it is all available, but it is all doable. When we will go for fully smoke-free, I think it's, okay, we have said that our, ultimate aspirations is to become a fully smoke-free, okay? But you need to translate it into something which is attainable, digestible. So you're breaking this big objective into a series of milestones. As I said,
Right.
6 years ago we had 0, then we had 25, another 5 years, which by the way is 4.5 years to be very precise, to go 50%. If you get to the 50%, you know that you have achieved so much, which was completely, to some
gonna be able to get there.
unattainable at that time, that, you're unleashing another, the territories of capabilities in a company which, can serve you there. So if you go to the 50%, yes, you will have a 75% and 100%. I actually think that this is a moment when we will be confronted, and actually I would like to be confronted with the interventions from the governments. Because if you think that, the benefit of going smoke-free is not only benefit to Philip Morris, it's the benefit to the smokers, it's the benefit to the society as such, right? If we all
Sure.
agree that, smoking creates all the harm and, is the some sort of, and has a, negative economic impact, etc. So going on smoke, I mean, a number of the stakeholders in this very broad ecosystem will and should benefit. I think that in the next 5 years, I will have a first countries or the governments who would like to establish the gliding path to the zero on the combustible cigarette, while only allowing the alternatives to be in the market. And the first time when I talk about this, when I said this whole thing, people were almost rolling their eyes, right? I mean, why this should happen? And I start showing them or reminding them about the examples we've already been confronted with, at least in the big parts of the world. So very few don't remember, or very few actually remember that, in the past, we all had these electric bulbs, right? The light bulbs which you have in your factories, in
Sure.
your offices, etc.
Sure.
Technology at that time was, highly energy consuming. We all have agreed that we should preserve the energy or use less energy, but we didn't want to live in the dark, right? We continued we wanted to have our houses lighted, and the factories, etc. So technology came, which offers you the same quality and the intensity of the light, but with much less energy. The governments have done in Europe and many other countries, essentially in most of the countries in the world. They banned the old technology. They only allow the bulbs, the light bulbs with the new technology to be sold. Historically, you may recall there was the issue about asbestos, right? Asbestos was, as a material, had a lot of applications in the construction industry, in the automobile industry, many other industries. Asbestos as a material was doing a job, right? I mean, there was a purpose, there was the reasons why the asbestos was used. Then we learned that asbestos is highly carcinogenic.
Then so cool. Yeah.
We invested in a technology. Okay, the job has to be done. Material is bad. Can I invent or come up with a material which can do the same job but doesn't create all of these carcinogenic parts, particles, and so on? The moment when this has been done, technology was there. The technology was validated. Science has confirmed that this material doesn't create all of these negatives and so on. Guess what we did? We banned asbestos, essentially, in most of the countries. Right. So I actually think cigarettes might go into one of these routes. One of these roads that we know that banning a cigarette is sometimes banning a cigarette. Sometimes people ask me why Philip Morris wants to go smoke free or stop selling cigarettes. I said, okay, I stop selling cigarettes, and what we're going to achieve? They are competition, they are competitors, they are illicit products, etc., etc. The only thing is demand is there, supply will be reallocated to somebody else. So it's not about me, making some heroic type of announcements and nothing's going to change. Okay, you could think that the industry should stop selling cigarettes. Okay, this is as long as you control the market, you don't have illicit, etc. Because remember, there is a demand on the other side. And how do we satisfy demand? This is what we're debating here. But I do believe that if you start giving people options and insist that this is a better options, or encourage them actually, better word, that there is a better options, that look, stop using cigarettes, move to this alternative, or quit smoking if you can, but if you don't, go if you wish, but if you don't, go and apply these products, and then put more and more constraints on the combustible business, including one day, 10 years from now, you can say, listen, no cigarette sales are allowed. UK has a couple months ago, right, announced, and not the only country, that they will allow the sale of the combustible car engines only by 2030, if I remember. Yeah. So, that's sort of the thinkings, that the better product has to replace the worst product, and the worst product actually has to disappear from the market, is a very sensible, to me, a solution. But then obviously requires a very serious conversation. Okay, what you do with the factories, what you do with the growers, what you do with the trade, who will be impacted, to what extent, and what are the mitigating strategies.
How much of your top line are you actually allocating for research and development so that you could actually pivot to more of these alternative, non-smoke or smoke-free products?
Well, our entire sort of annual research and development budget is almost at the $500 million level, and 99% of this budget is behind this product. We essentially not invest any R&D for the combustible products, other than just, statutory type of a requirements, which is, depends on the country, nicotine measurement, and that's it. Right. All innovations, everything, and the whole capabilities, not just the dollars, but the humans, right? The scientists and so on, the specialists going this product behind the reduced risk products. And soon I will start investing into the products which goes beyond the nicotine. This is even more because 3/4 of my total commercial spend on a global basis today is spent behind the new products. I have a 25% revenue coming from a new products, but I spend 75% of my commercial resources behind this product. Right. Because I believe this is a product which, makes sense to invest into, is a much better proposition, as I said, it for a smoker, for a society, for investors, all the other shareholders. So I'm seriously, I'm very convinced that this is the right thing to do. And, you know, smokers, as I said, we are so much encouraged by, you know, smokers in many countries. So when they have an opportunity to, you know, to try product like IQOS, but the other products in the categories as well, and they actually take these efforts and they stay. And, you know, we have a lot of great stories when the people will write to us, smokers, right, former smokers, because now they're IQOS users. You know, when people are using the language that IQOS changed my life, it's really touchy. Huh? That's that.
Yeah. You know, a good chunk of your organization relates to manufacturing, right? And we hear of, you know, robotizations taking place within the manufacturing spaces. What is your view, just out of curiosity, in terms of, you know, the repercussions going forward on a social context, right? At the rate that, you know, people are actually getting replaced by robots. Do you have any view about this and how you actually maintain balance between one and the other?
Yeah.
So that there is no disruption, there is no dislocation?
Just on record, right? Just I put it straight on the record. I don't want to be replaced by a robot. Okay, that's me. Okay, I don't mind a robot sitting next to me and, you know, helping me with, you know, some of the tasks, analyzing the data faster, seeing the things that maybe my brain itself will not see it, but with the help of some, I don't know, artificial intelligence, etc., we could really, you know, process the things faster, etc. There is the whole role in automations and the robotization. I mean, if you look the effort which the average worker had to take, physical effort, have to do, I don't know, 30 years, even in our factories versus today. I mean, very many of the jobs, which was about, I don't know, lifting the, you know, heavy materials, transporting heavy materials, that sort of the things have been one way or another automized. You know, the forklift is the step of automation, right? Of the very simple task of lifting an object and moving from a place A to B. I mean, it sounds maybe crazy for some of the people, but, you know, this is where you open yourself to what the technology can bring. But I don't think the question is about the automations or the robotization, which is replacing human. It's more finding the way where the humans can benefit from the fact that, you know, our life can be easier and we can achieve more, or, you know, do more things at the same time. That sort of avenues. I actually think that, you know, the whole life is about how you achieve what you want to achieve with the minimal effort, right?
Right.
I actually think that, you know, lazy employee is not a bad employee as long as he or she will do the job. And it's nothing wrong that we are lazy, because the laziness actually forces us to improve the things, right?
To get smarter, yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, laziness as such has this negative sort of a connotations, or you are lazy. It's not about that. I mean, if my objective is that I want to do my job in a fastest possible way with the minimum energy involved, this is what we should actually promote and reward. But again, a robot replacing me, where is then my fun?
Not a chance.
Where is then my fun? But, you know, I have a big desk. I can put one more chair for the robot sitting next to me, and, you know, jointly maybe I can, you know, I have to work less hours. Let's see.
Would you consider your organization as one that is on the curve in terms of empowering artificial intelligence as compared to your competitors?
Yeah, I mean, at the aspect when you start looking and you start applying the artificial intelligence, but look, especially now when we're going through this massive transformation that, you know, the classical combustible cigarette business is very much business to business type of a setup. So you spend a lot of time on, you know, building relations with the wholesalers, with the retailers, have the right presentations of your product on a shelf. But then the relations with the consumers are very anonymous, right? You just do some sort of a general communication, and depends on the country and the regulations. You have some billboards, you run some activities, etc. As a part of of our vision to go to smoke-free and to offer non-combustible products, we also decided to somehow be a significant part of relations with the consumers, their relations with consumers. Yeah. So obviously, the consumer, each consumer is different, right? So you have almost infinite number of the sub-segments, which allows you to better understand the consumer needs. So you almost go to the personalized, if you like, marketing. And, obviously here you have a pattern, so you can cluster these consumers in a subgroups, and this is where the role of the big data analytics, also, artificial intelligence comes to play, that, the system solutions, algorithms, etc., can help us achieving our objectives faster. But this is a part of the transformations now in a different, you can take the aspect of the employee relations. We, on the worldwide basis, right, on a global basis, we have almost 80,000 employees. We also try to get better in understanding the individual employees' needs, right? So you can also start applying some sort of these solutions into cater better, to respond better with, benefits, sort of a program to employees. As you know, we, in many countries, we have a lot of relations, where actually, sizable relations with the farmers community. We're running experimental farms today in Brazil, which allows us to grow tobacco 2-3 times a year on the farm, when we're taking an advantage of the farming conditions, but also apply quite a lot of technology in order to, grow this tobacco with the minimal, if possible, impact on the environment. We have drones flying over the tobacco farms with imaging, recognizing any potential diseases developing on the tobacco plant. And we can deliver the active agents to cure the disease with the precision of the one plant. So, you obviously have the huge, benefit of using much less of the crop protection agents. It's obviously lowering the cost, has a much, much lower impact on the environment and so on, but actually, drastically increasing the yield, i.e. how many kilograms of the tobacco the farmer can produce from a hectare of land. But in order to get to technology, you need to invest in a digitalization. It's not just the technology that the drone with the high resolution camera flies over the field. Somebody has to teach the system how to recognize the specific disease and what are the observable by the camera changes in color, for example, of the leaf, which will, with the very high probability, indicate that there is a disease on its way. So you have many of these applications. You cannot really, some companies think that, you can just impose digitalization on the company, operations. I think actually you need to, it's not about you allowing or not, right? Because you always, as the company, if you want to stay on the top of the game, you always have to be the best in class in whatever you think is the core to your business. And technology or use of technology can give a lot of advantage. So either you grab that advantage and you continuously stay on the top, or your competitor will take it and you can become obsolete. So it's a part of the game. So whether you like the digitalization or not, it's completely irrelevant. It's like, you cannot run the business today without using computer. But, when I started 30 years ago, you had 1 or 2 PCs in the office, and this was the magic, and everything was on a paperwork. And look, I am still fluent in how to use calculator. When I talk to my 13 years old son, he first doesn't understand why you need the calculator, because iPhone has it on. And on the top of this, he figured it out that you don't have to press buttons on the iPhone built-in calculator. You just ask Siri how much is 5 times 7. So it's a completely different, it's a completely different world.
I'm not unlike you. I mean, I'm very much like you. I used to be an accountant too, and I still use a calculator. The commonality between you or PMI with other successful companies would be that, you all spend a good chunk of your resources on research and development. And that allows you to pivot, unlearn, and relearn and repurpose, right? And that's how you make yourself a sustainable, going concern.
So historically, if you look, it's Philip Morris is a publicly traded company. We had all our, responsibilities to our shareholders and generate the returns, etc. And I think the really big decision was that, historically we start curving part of our resources, investing into the science, something which we'd never know at that time whether we will be successful. We didn't know at that time, even if we are successful, when we will be successful, for how long we need to invest. All of these things were, a set of assumptions. But you had the courage, you had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I think we played very well because for all of these years of a heavy investment behind this product, we paid regular dividend to our shareholders. What more important, we actually increased the dividend year on year. So we tried to do all of this investment phase and a transformation, and as much, quote unquote, immune our shareholders from, the fact that we're changing that model. It may require, some investments up front. Actually, we had a very good reception, so great support coming from our investors, that the moment when they learned what this innovation is about, there will be years of investment. Actually, we get a lot of encouragement from them to really run that business, run that company in the long run, for the long term. And we know that we're doing the right thing. And, if you have that perspective, because again, you see where you want to go, and you really sure that where you want to go makes sense, that this is what I want to achieve, this is my ultimate objective, then all of your decisions are becoming a bit easier, because you see this perspective, right? So in the moment when we said we want to go smoke-free, and I think this is what differentiates still Philip Morris International from many other tobacco companies, that we're not offering these products as another extension of our, of our cigarette portfolio. We actually encourage smokers to switch fully to this product. So we actually don't mind at all. Don't mind at all if Marlboro, Gsam, whatever smoker will completely stop using this product and move to this product. We actually think it makes sense, again, from a smoker's perspective, from a company perspective, for the population as such at large. So, and that but it sounds like a very, very small difference versus how the other play today.
We've come to the last question of our interview or chat here, and this is typical or characteristic of what we typically talk about, the end game for Indonesia or the world in 2045, right? And one of the few things that we've liked to talk about is the climate, right? And how do you think we should get the Gen Z members excited about not only conversing, but also doing what's necessary to keep the planet, as healthy as can be?
Look, every generation has the big role to play, right? I mean, each of us individually, if you take 7+ billion people, I mean, each of us have a role to play. I mean, I don't think it's unfortunately, things are not as simple as one could wish. So we usually try to approach this problem through, it's not me, it's others, right? It's you, and you should change, I am okay, industry should change. We put a lot of pressure on the oil and gas and, the energy companies. And rightly so. I think every company has right pressures from its shareholders, stakeholders, etc. will help them going through this change. But it's also us, right? I mean, we're using the energy. Okay, it's not oil companies which are using the energy. We're using the energy, so we can help something. Look, one of the small issues which we have in addition to the harm created by smoking in our business, is cigarette butts, right? And
Yeah.
okay, cigarette butts are not the main pollutant in the oceans and the waters, etc. But yes, I mean, we shouldn't have a butts in this place. Now, we're not throwing these butts on the street, right? These are the smokers who, use the product and extinguish the cigarette on a pavement and leave it there, rather than it disposed in a way that, the cigarette butts can be neutralized or reprocessed or whatever. But, we have programs when, we try to, it's difficult to say educate the smokers, is to make them more sensitive, right? And we ran a few campaigns more as on a test basis so far, but, then COVID came, etc. So quite rightly, our attention is somewhere else. But we had as a tagline, the world is not the ashtray, okay? Or the earth is not an ashtray. So don't throw these things. And, we know how to behave at homes, right? It's always, makes me, thinking that, we will not throw the cigarette butt on the floor in your house, right? We would not do it. You will presumably have an ashtray, you will dispose of this whole thing. So what changes in you when you go outside and, you start acting differently? Is it because you don't recognize it as your ownership? So I think a part of the education would be that, I know that the globe, that the Earth is a very big planet, and it's difficult to imagine that we all own it, but actually we do. Okay, and if we allow that, water is for free, air is for free, and, all of any other resources are for free, and it's, I can do whatever I want, and I use the, whatever way I want. I mean, collaterally, 7 billion people will make the things very complicated here. So I think I guess what I'm saying is, this population is all about this generation, is all about the education, but we need to,
Sure.
But it's a little bit also like with the governments, and, you could see that in some countries you have this populistic type of, of the directions, etc. But, I think, somewhere in the educational system, okay, I'm not saying that, you have to go and attend the highest university or whatever, but people have to be explained one thing. The government cannot give you more than you gave to the government. Okay, if the government start giving you more than we collaterally, giving to the government, there is the question, where is this coming from, okay? And sooner or later, somebody has to pay for that thing. And I think the same principle applies from, how you manage the sources and, what sort of a life you're living on there. The earth will not give you more than you're giving to the earth, and that's the problem. So you need to take this ownership and realize that there is a mutual relations, and we as the human species, we think that we're dominant, but I'm not sure we're really dominant.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jacek.
Thank you.
And let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Take care. Stay healthy. Ya. Teman-teman, itulah Jacek Olczak, pimpinan dari Philip Morris International. Terima kasih. Inilah Endgame.